I'm Jake Beaumont-Nesbitt. I'm an artist manager from London, England, and I work with a number of music tech companies, and I'm also the Director of Innovation and Education at the International Music Managers Forum, which is a network of artist business models around the world. AR, not AI, AR, augmented reality, because I think it's a great route to adoption of some of the ways that artists can extend their relationship with the audience beyond the conventional commodification of tickets, t-shirts, streams. It will involve richer experiences at live shows, but also with fan interaction. So if VR is, I'm completely shut down in a headset, augmented reality is I can still see the real world and interact with it, but I can be given prompts and information. And so, for example, you could have an artist on stage, maybe they're a percussionist and they're drumming wildly, and they hit a load of butterflies off a cymbal, and the butterflies fly individually. So all of the audience only see one butterfly, and that butterfly comes to each of the audience members directly. So you start to build up ways for live artists to interact directly with the audience, and then that butterfly, let's assume it's some sort of digital asset, and it would go into a wallet or the consumer's phone, and maybe it would give them a discount on a t-shirt later or something like that. So it's a great way, AR, of giving a richer experience, but using that as a Trojan horse to then bring other forms of digital assets in and ongoing engagement direct to fan. Artists need to move away from streaming as the revenue thing, which is basically a legacy based on, say, an artist like the Beatles, who barely toured, barely did any stadiums. They had a terrible merch deal. All of their revenue came from selling records. Lennon McCartney obviously had a thing going on the side, but for the Beatles as an entity, it was selling records. Artists now have the opportunity. We saw Helena Kosinski from Luminate talk about the percentage of fans that are super fans. So artists have an opportunity to super serve those super fans, and that will be away from streaming platforms where the price is fixed. So we can start to move into variable pricing, which allows artists at a lower level of total number of fans to make more money and become sustainable. Yeah, I think it's difficult for the artist to keep a story going. Sport finds it very easy to give a year-round narrative. So in the off-season, which players are transferred, which players are injured, what are they doing in their social life, who was caught on a holiday that they shouldn't have been on. And then during the season, who's been picked, what's the result, what's the score. For artists, it's very hard to tell that ongoing narrative. So some of the artists who've been successful have focused, for example, on their fashion or beauty routines, which works on Instagram or TikTok on a daily basis, or they've talked about their own mental health and awareness, or they've looked at green issues. I think increasingly artists will become sophisticated at being true to themselves and true to their audience to tell more personal stories that relate to them, and then that will build. Nick Cave has been a great example of that. He has this email letter where he talks about themes that are interested to him, and he's found new fans have discovered him through that. But what he's done brilliantly is customer retention. He's kept, rather than someone just being, oh, I love Nick Cave, I heard that album 5 years ago, I still listen to it. They have an ongoing relationship with him. And when you look at some of the stuff that's coming through on social commerce, there's great opportunities for artists to behave a bit like a trader on Amazon, that they can find all sorts of ways to monetize, depending on what the fan wants. It's got to be authentic. There are parameters within which the artist has to operate. They don't want to defile their brand and lose the relationship with the audience. And it's very hard to describe and encapsulate, because in the old model, you're selling vinyl/CDs or streams or downloads, you're selling tickets, you're maybe selling some t-shirts. It's very simple. Whereas now Rihanna's selling beauty and underwear, and she's making over $1 billion from that. And each artist, Nick Cave, is selling emotions and discord, and then he's got a dialogue. He's got opportunities to monetize that, but in ways that work for his fan. So it's hard to describe a one-size-fits-all model, but that's the opportunity. if you think of Spotify, it's one price fits all. It's either that free model, or let's say it's the subscription model. All of those different fans with their different behaviors are given one product. This is terrible. There should be the opportunity to serve each of the fans wherever they go to. And this is one of the things with the metadata stuff, is if the metadata geeks can describe better back to the artists and their fans who their audience is, then the artist and their manager can start to strategize better how to create different propositions for all of those different fans across. You use Nick Cave as the example, across all the things he does. I would have thought there's elements of fashion that would fit with Nick Cave. There's elements of social commentary that would fit, maybe books, literature, poetry. I think this is an opinion. It's very subjective and I have no data on it. But I would assume he's got a larger audience now than he had back then. And so I also assume that if he was starting out now, he would have a smaller audience than... So what's happened is people have nostalgia for the credibility and the cool of their youth. So the Jesus and Mary chain, hardly anyone went to see them, but now people would go and see them at a festival or in a park and maybe buy a t-shirt because they are a brand that's as cool as, say, Marlon Brando or Smoking Marlboros. But those people didn't necessarily smoke Marlboro or listen to the Jesus and Mary chain when they were kids, but they have the money to do it now. So I would think that the current demographic for Nick Cave would be older, who have disposable income. They've probably got kids, had kids, maybe the kids have left, and they're prepared to spend on premium shows like Nick Cave, but maybe they're also opera curious or looking at very sophisticated shows on Netflix rather than behaving like a 20-year-old going to rock clubs and thinking about dating all the time. I think it would be very sad if you did, but a lot of artists have that expectation. So they're like, my validation comes as an artist might come from signing a record deal and measuring myself in sales. The problem is that model's kind of dead. Unless you get to the Ed Sheeran level, which is a particular demographic on Spotify, you're never going to make great money from those streaming platforms. But what you can do is build an audience of 10,000 fans and keep them closer, and digital tools are enabling a much more intimate and direct relationship. Therefore, on the revenue per user, revenue per consumer, you can pull more out. The Japanese are ahead on this, the Indians are ahead on it. We're still stuck in the Atlantic West on a kind of concept of signing to a label, getting streams, complaining about the price of the streams, doing a show whenever we're due to do a tour. Rihanna's a great example. Chance the Rapper's probably the best artist for changing things. He doesn't get celebrated enough what he did from a business perspective, that in Chicago he would book out cinemas and say to his fans, there's a film I really want you to see, come along. It's the sort of thing Taylor Swift's been doing as well. So there are outlying examples. I think Chance the Rapper's so important because he did it independently. He didn't do it through the traditional method of signing, but I would also look to Japan and India for different business models that maybe the lawyers in Western Europe, North America are not used to signing off on. So we need pressure on the lawyers to reinvent how artists get investment, so that the artists are free to pursue all these different pricing models and business models, and then Nick Cave can make something that's perfect for him, and BTS can make something that's completely different and brings in different revenues that's perfect for them. He's the Elvis of it. So the point of Elvis is he's the one who comes along at the point where television is widely spread across America. The teenager has been invented post-World War II. They've come into some money. He's shocking and dangerous. The parents don't want you to go anywhere near him. And so he's really exciting. But he changes the business model because you then have to have Elvis's recording of Blue Suede Shoes, not Carl Perkins or anyone else. So pre-Elvis, he's not the one that did it. You had Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby before. But what Elvis does is you must own the star performer's version of it. You can't just have anyone's version of that song. It has to be his. So Taylor Swift is associated with her songs, whereas if she's such a great writer, before Elvis, she would have probably just been known as a rater, and someone in Liège would have played her songs and someone in London would have played her songs. It wouldn't have been about hearing her on your radio. It would have been hearing a local performer sing her song. So Elvis changed the business model, and we have the star performer, the artist. And what Chance the Rapper does in changing the business model is he says you can do independent at scale, and with that comes a responsibility to communicate with your audience and get feedback from them. Rather than so you become a business to consumer, Chance the Rapper straight to his fans, artist to fan thing, which is completely different from the big bands of the 90s. Let's say Dire Straits were a B2B business, that they were selling themselves to the record label, to the publisher, to the promoter, who would then sell on to the consumer.